This bit on swaps is sponsored by Examinator Online, the platform to go to for SFC exam practice questions. Now, what is a swap? It's an agreement between two parties to swap financial obligations. There are two types of swaps: interest rate swaps and currency swaps. With currency swaps, you swap the principal and you swap the full interest payments. With interest rate swaps, you do not swap the principals, but you net off the interest rate payments. Now, what are you going to be examined at paper 7? It will be interest rate swaps. So an interest rate swap, periodic interest rate payments are swapped. Let's look at the setup. You have two parties, party A and party B. Party A wants to pay floating rate, party B wants to pay fixed rate. Now, if a swap agreement is going to work, it will benefit both parties, and we will see that in the example that follows. Now, you will see this wording in a question, that one party wants to pay floating, one party wants to pay fixed. So you set up the diagram. You should do this on a piece of paper in the exam room. You should note that A wants to pay floating, so you set up in the swap arrangement, A pays floating to B and B pays fixed to A. That is the outcome that both parties want to arrive at. Party A, in the meantime, will take out a fixed rate loan from a third party, so that B will pay fixed to A. A will then use that fixed to pay off the fixed rate borrowing, leaving party A paying a floating rate, which is what it wants to do. Party B will take out a floating rate loan. Party B will receive floating rate from A, will use that floating rate interest to pay off the floating rate borrowing, and they are left with paying a fixed rate to A, which is what party B wants. So when you have a swap question in the exam, set up this diagram to start with and put the arrows at the top as they are intended, as you are told in the question. Okay, let's look at an example. Big bank, and it will be this amount of text in the question. Big bank wants to borrow a floating rate loan, and Great Corporation wants to borrow a fixed rate loan. So there are your two arrows at the top of the diagram when we get there. Big bank can borrow fixed rate funds at 5% and floating rate funds at HIBOR. HIBOR is floating rate. Great Corporation can only borrow fixed rate funds at 8% and floating rate funds at HIBOR plus 0.5%. So you can see that Big Bank is better off in both fixed rate and floating rate funds. Both parties enter into an interest rate swap arrangement whereby Big Bank, now you're getting the details, Big Bank pays Great Corporation a floating rate of HIBOR, and Great Corporation pays Big Bank a fixed rate of 6%. So let's set up the diagram. You will have 1.5 minutes to answer this question, so you have got to automatically be able to write down the diagram. Now, what is the arrangement, the interest rate swap arrangement? It is that Big Bank BB pays HIBOR to Great Corporation, and Great Corporation pays 6% fixed to Big Bank. We've been given those details. Now, how does it work? It works that Big Bank pays 5% fixed. Now, it's going to receive 6% fixed from Great Corporation. So it is going to be better off by 1%. And Big Bank will pay HIBOR to Great Corporation. So net, as we will see in a moment, it's better off by 1%. Great Corporation, on the other hand, is going to be receiving HIBOR from Big Bank. It will pay HIBOR at HIBOR plus 0.5% because that is what it can borrow at. You will see that it's worse off by 0.5%. However, It's paying fixed, and it wanted to pay fixed at 6% to Big Bank when it could only get it in the market at 8%. So what's the outcome? The outcome is that Big Bank could borrow at HIBOR. It is borrowing at HIBOR, but it's receiving 6% fixed, paying 5% fixed, net better off by 1%. What about Great Corporation? Great Corporation could have borrowed at 8% fixed. It's now borrowing at 6% fixed. So it's 2% better off, but it is receiving HIBOR from Big Bank and it's paying HIBOR plus 0.5% in the market. So it's losing 0.5%. So net, it is better off by 1.5%. So there is the outcome of a swap, where both entities gain from the swap arrangement. They are net paying the type of interest they want. Big Bank is paying floating rate and Great Corporation is paying fixed. Now, a question set in the paper 7 exam will give you details of what Great Corporation and Big Bank can do in the markets, and then they'll ask you which one of the following will benefit both entities. And you will get examples of swap interest rate agreements. And what you have to do is put the numbers into the diagram, and often there'll be two swaps that work, but one will be better than the other, and that will be the answer. Now, I can tell you from experience that these swaps questions, if you don't do the diagram and if you don't write down the information quickly, you'll get lost and you will have to guess. But if you get into the discipline of putting forward the diagram fast, putting the details into it very quickly, you will see what the best arrangement is. You will get the answer and you can move on. The best way to practice these swaps questions is go to Examinator Online for the Paper 7 practice questions.